Watching Checkpoint here on KTN News. We thank you for staying with us. We want to get into that conversation I told you about a little bit earlier. It has largely been described as the war against corruption. But is it a war? Let's speak to a man who was charged with prosecuting graft and other crimes, the former DPP in the country, Philip Murgor. Asante sana for making time for us this evening.
Yes.
So President Uhuru Kenyatta has declared that, corruption is what he wants to be part of his legacy. So he's focusing on that, and he promises that this time around it will be different. The political rhetoric you've heard so far, are you convinced this is what Kenya needs, this kind of pronouncements and will, if at all, you see it that way?
Sophia, first of all, thank you for having me on the show.
Karibu.
It's been some time since I was on your show, or this show. My view is that Uhuru must be taken seriously. We have no choice but to take him seriously. This is his last chance. This is the government's last chance to fix the problem of corruption. So I have absolutely no reason to doubt that he's serious. If he's not serious, then we all sink.
Yeah, because there are some who look at it this way, that in 2015, he had CSs simply mentioned in corruption, asked to step aside. Now, with the debacle around sugar just recent weeks, and we've seen the CSs and the responsibilities that fell squarely on their dockets, there's no action. In fact, it's calls of impeachment we've been hearing here and there. But in as far as he be the appointing authority, that this is what would speak that he really means business this time around.
I see a slight difference with the approach. I think Uhuru Kenyatta has learnt a few lessons. The other time he took a political approach to fighting corruption. He picked a list of people who had been adversely mentioned and asked them to step aside. That, of course, all backfired when the investigating and prosecuting authority then said there was no evidence. He obviously has learnt that from that lesson. He has picked a new team to charged with administering the criminal justice system, and now it's more investigation oriented. In other words, he will not focus on what the politicians are saying in Parliament regarding corruption. He'll focus more on what the investigators and the prosecutors put together, and which is then taken to court. If it is taken to court, then the CS or whoever it is concerned has to step aside.
But aside from that, he's the appointing authority. When they are seen to have dropped the ball, when they have seen to have failed Kenyans, sugar comes in its numbers, some we're told contaminated, we lose a lot of money, surely.
Sophia, I'm waiting like you for that prosecution.
Yes.
I am waiting. I'm not here to defend him. I am anxious to know who was responsible, and I hope they are finally prosecuted.
Right.
Yes.
So that's on the president's part and the political will and the question around that. But what do you make of the DPP? He's been, I think, 6 months in office. He has those who support him, and then there are those who are saying, yeah, just hold on, same script, different cast.
I would like to believe in the new DPP. I've been in that office. His is a very, very, very difficult task. I've likened the office of DPP to the most difficult job in the country. Look at the next time you see the DPP in the news or on television, you will see him graying in front of your very eyes. That responsibility is enormous if you do your job properly. If, on the other hand, you don't do your job properly, a DPP gets fat, no one talks about him, and our reputation as a corrupt country grows. So the DPP has barely been in office, a year. We've had vigorous activity in the area of prosecution. Extremely vigorous. Everybody was clapping. The polls rated him very highly until it took very recently a somewhat political turn in as far as his critics are concerned. But if you ask the common man how he's doing, I think he's still perhaps the most inspirational officer in the Jubilee government today. I say that as a person who's been in that office.
An independent officer, though.
An independent office, a difficult job, and I believe today if you handed Nuruddin Haji a complaint to investigate, he will order an investigation, and if there is evidence, he will take action.
So do you believe the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions is being strategic? As you've said, we've heard of numerous arrests. Dozens have been arraigned in court. Some have taken plea, others are yet to. But the recent arrest, and the most high-profile one, of the Deputy Chief Justice, have seen some question his stack, have seen some wonder whether it's strategic or it's, all over the place.
I have very little to say about the facts. I don't have all the facts. And the second issue is it's not very easy for a professional like me to comment on something before the court. All I can say is I've listened to the discussion, and both sides of that debate have a point. And when both sides have a point, let the court decide. I watched my good friends on the defense side arguing that whilst they support the war against corruption, or they should not be seen to be opposing the war against corruption,
right,
they had issues with a particular prosecution. A defense counsel should not be put himself in that position where on the one hand you praise what is happening and on the other side you criticize it. I have listened to the facts. I've listened to what Bonatuju has had to say. I wouldn't go that far. I would simply say there's an argument on both sides. It is before the High Court. Mr. Haji insists he is correct in what he's doing, while the defense think otherwise. It will soon sort itself out.
Yeah.
But assuming we're not talking about the Deputy Chief Justice for a second, so that we're not discussing the merits of that case, all we need to know is that in the past there has been a precedent for prosecuting a judge for a criminal offense, and there has also been a precedent for having a tribunal investigate the conduct of a judge who is accused of misconduct. So that puts both sides in a position where they should just wait for the outcome in this case.
Yeah. I'm curious to get your views, because we're not getting into the merits or demerits, whatever she's accused of or otherwise. Those are matters before court. But outside of that, as you said, there have been judges who have been taken through due process in as far as cases against them. But in those instances, we saw at least two of them that I come to mind now step aside, or at least not preside over cases for the duration of their trials until they were suspended.
Yes.
Do you share that kind of thinking?
I recall the case of Justice GBM Kariuki.
Yes.
And during the time when his case continued in court, he was not on the cause list, as we call it. He was not hearing cases. It's a matter of common sense and good practice that a judge who is facing a criminal charge should not then preside over cases involving, litigants. Because, of course, in the eyes of the litigant, they will be asking, shouldn't you be dealing with your own problem? That does not apply in this current case because we have a stay of that process. But if at all the High Court determines that Deputy Chief Justice Mwilu must face trial, it is expected, and I think it will be required, that she does not conduct any of her judicial duties while she's facing that trial.
Yeah. But also you spoke about the Judicial Service Commission, the tribunals that have been set up, for instance, in the case of the former DCJ. In looking at the strategic approach on this one, do you think that's a step that perhaps should have been explored by the investigators to present a petition to the JSC as opposed to this all-out approach we've seen?
Sophia, many years ago, when I was a junior prosecutor, the requirements or the standards for mounting a prosecution were very low. And it happened many times because the police were in charge of or handled many prosecutions. You could file a charge sheet and then go fishing for the evidence. In this day and age, you only take that decision to charge when you're ready to prosecute the next day. So in the circumstances that unfolded, I have no doubt in my mind that thought crossed the minds of the prosecutors, that they have the option of asking the JSC to investigate and deal with the complaint, and they also had the choice of mounting a prosecution. And they must have decided for their own reasons that this was a case that was fit for prosecution.
Right. So,
having sat in that seat, I know what it takes to make such a decision. And I also know, and I went through it myself, many a decision that touched on politics was often taken the political way by its critics. Sometimes not because it was political, but because then the strategy in the defense is to make it political. So I don't really see, in the present situation, anything clear as to whether it should have gone one way or the other, except that the person in charge was faced with the decision and he made the decision.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we've seen quite a number of processes start. I want us to take a break, but when we come back, look at even when you were DPP.
Yes.
The Anglo leasing case, for instance, that Kenyans have never seen quite closure on that subject. Golden Bag. This is a decade, years on. So that should we expect differently with these matters that we are starting to see prosecution on now, or will we see another story that we'll be talking about years to come? So please stay with us here on Checkpoint. We're taking a quick break. We'll be right back.